Okay,
I'm I call him in work.
a couple of years ago, my sponsor moved, and I thought that he'd be unattainable, so I decided that I was going to change sponsors, and I did, and I'm really grateful that I did, and it's been nothing but a blessing to have my new sponsor in my life, and here he is.
Yeah, my name's Mike, and I'm an addict. Hi, everybody. I'm grateful to be here this morning, and one thing I can assure you is that I don't know what I'm going to say, and the second thing that I can assure you is that I'm going to read out of the literature, and the last thing that I can assure you of, I'll share some personal experience, strength, and hope. First thing I want to read this morning is in the recovery text, and it's on page 49, and it says, "We have found it helpful to have a sponsor and to use a sponsor. Sponsorship is merely a way of describing the special interest of an experienced member that can mean so much to newcomers after they turn to NA for help. Sponsorship is also a two-way street, helping both the newcomer and the sponsor. The sponsor's clean time and experience may well depend on the availability of sponsors in a locality. Sponsorship is also the responsibility of the group for helping the newcomer. It is implied and informal in its approach, but it is the heart of the NA way of recovery from addiction, one addict helping another." It goes on, and I think I'm going to read a little bit more. It says, "One of the most profound changes in our lives is in the realm of personal relationships. Our earliest involvements with others often begin with our sponsor. As newcomers, we find it easier if we have someone whose judgment we trust and can confide in. We find trusting others with more experience to be a strength rather than a weakness. Our experience reveals that working the steps is our best guarantee against a relapse. Our sponsors and friends can advise us regarding how to work the steps. We can talk over what the steps mean with them. They can help us to prepare for the spiritual experience of living the steps. Asking God as we understand Him for help improves our understanding of the steps. When we are prepared, we must try our newly found way of life. We learn that the program won't work when we try to adapt it to our life. We must learn to adapt our life to the program." When I first got here, I walked into an NA meeting in my hometown. I'd been thrown out of the first treatment center that I'd ever been in and sent to a halfway house, and I was thrown out for not following the rules, and I got the halfway house and I was thrown out of there for the same thing. So I had to go home, and I was really scared because the only person that I knew that didn't get high in my hometown was my mother. And I went home, and I'd met a couple of guys when I was in this treatment center because they'd come from Anderson for a Tuesday night meeting. It was an H&I meeting. And in that Tuesday night meeting in this treatment center in 1982 was where I was first carried the message of hope that Narcotics Anonymous gives us. And I went to this meeting, and there were like 4 of us sitting there. And back then we pretty much hung on to each other for dear life. And one of those 4 guys I asked to sponsor me, and he was about 6'4" and probably went about 285, and I was physically intimidated by him, and I thought that I might listen to him. And I got to know him a little bit better. He'd spent 2 tours in Vietnam and did 2 stretches in a joint. And he let me know right away that he cared about me. And he let me know right away that if I was willing to do some things, this program could work. And he stuck by me because I came here in 1982, and God didn't clean me up until 1984. And when I got out of treatment the 3rd time in 1984, I went home and I got on the phone. And I started this conversation with Perk. And I remember getting the words, "I think," out of my mouth. And immediately he said, "Well, in case you can't tell, motherfucker, you don't think very goddamn well." For the next 90 days, you have my permission to go to the bathroom and defecate when you have to. Otherwise, any other decision you make in your life, you call me first, you know. And what I'm trying to tell you is he was right. I didn't think well. And also, I learned to turn my life and my will over to the care of a sponsor long before I ever worked a third step. And I think at the time that's what I needed. He was always real quick to make me see my part in things, you know, which was necessary for my personal growth. In other words, by the time he got time to do an 8th and 9th step, he left no doubt whatsoever in my mind that I was not the victim, that I was a victimizer. You know, that I was responsible for my actions clean. That I had to learn to do things the exact opposite way that I've been doing things all this time. And he was a real good sponsor, and he walked me through the first 5 years of clean time. He was real quick to chew my ass, but that was okay. You know, because I knew he loved me, he cared about me, and I knew that I could share things with him and he wouldn't repeat them. And I've shared things with him that I've probably never shared with another human being, and he did the same with me, because he told me one time that I knew him better than his wife. And when I was 5 years clean, he went back out. And he died shooting dope when I was 11 years clean. And the man that sponsors me today has sponsored me for the last 12 years. And the contrast in their personalities are different. The guy that sponsors me today is fairly quiet, fairly laid back. Sometimes after talking to him on the telephone, I'll have to hang up the telephone and sit there and scratch my head, and then it registered. Damn, he just got done chewing my ass. You know? But he also guides me through the steps. A couple years ago, he had me do another inventory, and it was a real good thing for me in my recovery, because I got to a point to where I had things bothering me, and I was really powerless over everything that was bothering me, but yet I was hanging on to far too many things. You know, they were keeping me fairly miserable most of the time, and I'm real grateful that he had me do that inventory. And he suggested that I use the Narcotics Anonymous Step Working Guide, and it was the first time that I'd worked a step using that tool. And I don't know about y'all, but I print, and I can print as quick as y'all can write. And when I got done, I had 12 hours invested in that inventory. 12 hours of writing, you know. And that, you know, it was good, because I didn't do it all at once. You know, when I got really tired of it, I'd put it down and I'd go back to it. You know, and just like one of the guys that I sponsor today, you know, I asked him probably before I left to come up here, how you coming on that second step? Oh, I'm almost done. I said, well, that's all well and good, but you've been telling me you're almost done for 2 months. You know, get out your step working guide and go for it. You know, another thing has happened. My sponsor started going through a divorce a couple months ago, and it's given me a chance to give back a lot of the things that he's given me over the years, and it's once again proven me that sponsorship's a two-way street. Today in my life, I sponsor 7 people. I will not take on another sponsee. I have enough. My hands are full. I know my limits. I know my capabilities, and if I don't, my sponsor will be quick to point them out to me. 2 guys I sponsor, it was something that I really never thought that I'd do, but I've become comfortable with it. I sponsor a couple of guys that live out of town. Naturally, I don't hear from them as often as I do the other guys I sponsor, but both of them will pick up the telephone when they need to. You know, they've proven that to me over the last 3 years. You know, they will pick up the phone and call when they need to. I sponsor one guy, and in September I'll be able to give Dave his 17-year token. And he asked me to sponsor him when I was 6 months clean, and you talk about the blind leading the blind. You know, but at the time, you know, it was the availability of people in our area, and there weren't a lot of folks. And you know, one of the first things that I noticed when we went to our Halloween function after meetings and stuff was that Dave really hated to hug people. So the next time we all function to hug every addict in the room. The last time that Dave got loaded, he had 364 days clean. So after he went back through treatment another time, I wouldn't let him take a token for a year. He teases me about it, he calls it token probation. But, those are just two of the things that had to come from the power grader myself, because believe me, I'm not really, those things are given to me. I don't sit around and think them up, they just come to me. Some of the guys that I sponsor, it's been a real joy, Two of the guys that I sponsor, I've worked with one guy off and on for 16 years, and he's got 5 months clean again, clean I think today. And the other guy I'm talking about, he's been clean about 6 months, and I've worked with him the last 5 years. And I won't give up, because no one ever gave up on me, But there again, after one of them came back this last time, I did have another guy that I sponsored in the past ask me, and I just told him I couldn't. But what I was willing to do was not make him run around and wonder, where he was going to find a sponsor. I dumped him in Johnny's lap. And I felt okay with that, because I've watched Johnny work with guys that are newer in the program, and he does a real good job. Probably the best thing for me about being a sponsor and having a sponsor is that it gives me a place to go to deal with issues that I don't want to dump on the tables in meetings. And it's been real helpful to me in my recovery. And I don't really feel bad about not going to meetings and dumping things on the table, because there's just some things that are too personal of a nature that I really don't want to dump on the tables. I was listening when Dana was sharing last night, and she was talking about outside issues. I don't think they're outside issues. I just think they're issues, period, And if they are messing with me bad enough, yeah, I'll dump them on the table. I'll do anything it takes in order to stay clean, but most of the time, there's just things of a real personal nature. Here lately, it's been a lot of issues that I've worked on in my recovery for a long time. There are issues between myself and my mother. My mother's terminally ill, and I've been doing my best the last couple of years to clean up things the best I can. I've made all the amends that I've needed to make. I'm her primary caregiver today. That inventory that I talked about a little while ago, one of the best things that came out of that inventory was when I started writing the inventory, I was fairly certain that I was still angry at my mother due to issues of childhood abuse. But what I found out doing that inventory was that I was angry because I knew my mother is going to die, and by dying she's going to abandon me. That's the way the disease plays tricks in my mind today. I was angry and I really didn't know why. Probably the funniest experience that I've heard about a long time. I heard at a function over in Illinois, and I knew both the guys, Roger and Stan. Stan sponsors Roger, and Roger calls him up on the phone one night, and he's just whining, and Roger's 14 years clean. He's just whining, about everything that's not right. And Stan calmly told him, he says, get in the recovery text and read page 106. So Roger quickly hangs up the phone and grabs his recovery text and turns to it. It's a blank page. So he jumps back on the phone and he calls Stan, and he says, Stan, page 106 is a blank page. And Stan says, so is that fucking shit you're whining about. So, I haven't done it to someone I sponsored, but it was so hilarious that I don't think I'll ever forget it. I I met both guys, like I said, at this function that I try to run over to. It's called Flight to Freedom. It's over in Illinois. And I thought that was real humorous. You know, some of the things that aren't humorous about sponsorship, I know early on in my own recovery, when people began to ask me to sponsor them, and then they go back out, I took that shit real personal. You know, it hurt a lot. I even caught myself a couple times walking around wondering things like, you know, what could I have said? You know, what suggestion could I have given them? Could I have gotten them to begin writing on the first step? And I'd take these things to my sponsor, and he'd sit me down, he'd remind me, you know, that I can carry the message and not the addict, and that some people come around and they really don't want this thing that we call recovery, but those that want it bad enough will take suggestions, will work steps, and will do the things they need to do in order to stay clean. You know, my sponsor today, like I said, he's pretty quiet and he's pretty laid back. That's just his personality, but you know, he let me know 12 years ago when we talked about him sponsoring me. He says, look, in the course of this relationship, I'm going to give you suggestions, and as things begin to unfold in your life, if you keep coming back to me with these same issues, which is going to tell me that you're not following my suggestions, and we're going to have to sit down and figure out that this relationship's not going to work, and you're going to have to find somebody else to sponsor you. You know, and it's not that he tries to make my decisions for me, and it's not that he tries to dictate and run my life, but he knows me well enough as a man, as a recovering addict, and as a human being. He knows what suggestions to give me to get me to move in a positive direction, you know, and I'm real grateful for that. And, you know, I share with the guys that I sponsor, you know, that I'm not here to make their decisions for them, but rather I'm here to help them live with the decisions they make. And I really hope that, you know, nobody picks up behind that stuff, you know, thinking, well, you know, he said I can make my own decisions, so, you know, my decision is to go to the high. Well, you know, if it is, tough shit, you know. I'm not going to take responsibility for that. But for me, you know, it is an important tool in my recovery. You know, the guys that I sponsor, including the guy that I've worked with off and on for 16 years, Terry will confront me in a heartbeat, because when Terry first met me, it was in 1985, and that's the way our relationship began. You know, we would do for each other in a loving, caring manner. We would hold up that mirror to each other and show each other what we saw in the other person, you know, and that's okay, because, you know, the one thing that I enjoy about being a sponsor the most is the fact that for me it is a two-way street. That there are times when I don't have to pick up the telephone and call my sponsor when something's really bothering me, because one of my sponsees has called me, and I feel comfortable enough with those guys in our relationship to share what I have to share, you know, about me and about what's going on with me. I'd like to thank the North Central area for once again hosting this convention. I do consider it an honor and a privilege anytime that I'm asked to share. You know, I've had another great weekend. You know, I come up here and for 3 or 4 days, you know, everything's real quiet and laid back, and I take time out from the daily rat race, and I learn once again to breathe deep and take it slow. And you know, every time I'm up here for a long weekend, I get a hell of a lot of serenity. I leave here with a lot of serenity, and I think it's nothing more than getting away from the day-to-day rat race and coming up here where I know people that love and care about me, and there's a lot of people come up here that I love and care about a great deal. And for me, it's always just a real spiritual weekend. With that, I'll pass.
Okay. I'm John Mike, and I'm going to introduce the co-speaker. The co-speaker is Dave, and he's a friend of mine, and I value the time that I've spent with him. done some campouts together, and and it's just really cool. And we got all the books too, so I give you Dave.
Thanks, John.
You're welcome, man.
My name's David. I'm an addict.
Hi, Dave.
I'm the co-speaker, so what he said. Yeah, I brought in my head. I was thinking like tools of recovery. So it's like, of course, like some of the books that we make, but also the blank one and a pen. Not everybody uses this. Not that's cool. A lot of us do. There's writing. There's other stuff. There's going to be a quiz later, as you can see. I've got everything ready. Yesterday, I ended up in a workshop, sitting in a chair, where 5 minutes before, I wasn't even thinking about that. I used to be a workshop fiend. If you were at a convention and you wanted to find me, just check the schedule and check the rooms. I was desperate. And I don't know, I'm really very grateful for workshops. And I moved up to Elkhart about a year ago, from an area that hosts a sponsorship workshop every year. And one of the things that's blown me away is that people bring things I can use, and it's not always like stuff on paper, just things they do, but also feelings, attitudes. I've learned a lot about how to use my sponsor and how to utilize in my life my sponsees. The guidance that I've gotten from sponsors has been damn good. It got things in my head real well. Sponsees helped me move it to my heart and my hands, watching them grow. And it's like, when I see somebody else's light bulb go off, and I feel that warm feeling in my middle, I feel like, something just dropped. And that distance in my own life, when I try and apply and practice these principles, trying to get these things from my head into my hands and my heart. God, I can take so many mistakes. I don't learn very well from my own mistakes because I'm just so twisted in how I see them, because it's me. I just watch somebody else growing, and I just feel stuff. I know, I kind of equate it to when I watch a Lassie movie, and I can cry over the stupid dog. It's like sometimes it's easier for me to love myself by loving you guys than it is to go right there. When I catch myself grinning over somebody's blossoming out of a little bit of insecurity over something, and I was just like, okay, instead of me being a jerk about it, so I was watching somebody this weekend that last year at this time was trying to share one of their talents and doing it so shy when they get going, and then once they got going, they were just letting it shine. And this year they were just waiting for their chance. There was no shyness to it, and it was look at me, center of attention. And we're sitting right next to him with somebody very quietly sharing the same talent and the same skill, who years ago I'd seen doing the look at me side, and I didn't get to see them being shy, but now I saw the other side, and I'm just like, wow, it's all me, And in sponsorship, I get a really close look at both sides of all me. Just like I don't just use my sponsor, and I don't just suck one guy dry with every little thing and all my big details, I try and let my sponsor know everything I tell you guys, so I don't tell, what I want to here and another part of me there. My sponsor's the one guy that pulls it all together, And same thing with my sponsees. I see around the campfire somebody else in recovery, but, only a snapshot. I get to see so much in my sponsees' lives and get to see so much of myself. My early experiences with sponsorship, my really early ones were, starting right off in the 4-step in another program, in several other programs. Don't mean to single anything out. I was desperate and I was looking all over the place. Starting a written inventory without a strong relationship with a sponsor. I was writing the day I got a sponsor. They got me going. They also had me sponsoring people at 6 months. And I wasn't tied into people other than my sponsor very well, much less my sponsor, and I did not know each night before I picked up a pen whether I was going to pick up a pen or pick up something else and kill myself. It was a nightmare, doing a fearful inventory, and I really was using it to just beat the hell out of myself, and I was very much alone and not knowing what to do or how to ask. I didn't even know what the questions were. When I found NA, it was after I had been already going to NA meetings and after I already had an NA book. As a matter of fact, my first experience with recovery was Narcotics Anonymous. Somebody else brought me a book. I had somebody on the inside in treatment. And that was my first concept of a sponsor, I guess. I never thought of Bill being my sponsor. He was my best friend using, but in a way he was my sponsor, and a poor choice. But my first experience was a guy moving into my area who, at the time was used to a lot of Narcotics Anonymous and meetings, was used to people reading out of this book, and he had 3 years clean, and I remember him still to this day as a god and a dick. And I have co-speaker issues about wanting his approval the way it's to this day still, the way I want my dad's approval. I don't have that with my current sponsor, or the sponsor I had before him. This guy was saying something different than what I was hearing in the meetings. It was the message of NA, and it was starting with doing stuff, even, at step 1, and learning about the Narcotics Anonymous program versus take what I like and leave the rest my program. I know a lot of people out there who are working their own program that, they just kind of incorporate therapeutic value of one addict helping another. They incorporate all kinds of things, and I feel like they're moving through the process of recovery. There's different strokes for different folks, and a big part of it's what are they seeing in their bent perspectives, and what am I seeing? What am I attracted to? I was attracted to what this guy was saying. He made recovery look attractive to me for the first time, beyond freedom. I'm really grateful for, in a lot of ways, for that time. I mean, I'm on almost 2 years before I came across this guy. I'm kind of grateful for that time when I got just what I needed to survive, because in the hardest moments in my recovery, I've gotten a lot of dogma. Before I got clean, I got a lot of dogma since I've been clean. And I survived without a lot of the things that we supposedly, it has to look this way or you're screwed. Well, I've been miserable in my recovery, and I feel like I've relapsed without the use of drugs, but I haven't picked up without a lot of the dogmatic stuff that I've been fed. And that time when I didn't have those things in my life, what was attractive to me was I wasn't using drugs. I wasn't going through that hell. And I would rather be miserable clean and know that I'm a goddamn miracle, man. And, I can be sitting there picking on everybody else's recovery, going, they're not good enough, they're not good enough, they're not good enough, miserable, and thank God I don't have what they got there, but for the grace of God go I. Judgmental, closed-minded, hating you guys till I learn how to stop hating myself, and not pick up based on just going to some meetings, going to not having all the stuff. But recovery luckily has a lot more to offer than that. The bottom line is one promise: freedom from active addiction. But wow, we've come a long way. I mean, the stuff that people work on today, and shit, that's some of the stuff that kept me clean. Staying up all night playing euchre, all kinds of stuff, little things from that to, sleeping around, to all kinds of stuff that, those are the shortcomings that people are working on early on in their recovery today. I'm looking around the room and I'm seeing just, a pretty good number of people for, 10 in the morning. I didn't know what time this was when I signed up. It's under 20, I think. I'm not counting room, but what I am kind of counting, just rough, is that there's pretty much swinging around a century represented here, and a lot of old experiences. And I know that a lot of the stuff I've shared, not just the feelings side, but what it looked like early on. I'm not alone. I was a kid when I got clean. Well, hell, my God. I got clean just before I stopped being a teenager. Barely before I stopped being a teenager. There's kids coming now before they start being a teenager. All kinds of things have changed. We had it easy in a lot of ways to sponsor people early on, because by the time somebody found Narcotics Anonymous, they were pretty much whooped up one side and down the other. Thank God today people are getting seeds planted earlier, but it's not just seeds planted. People are making it without going as far down as I went. People who are attracted because thank God they were in an area where they were led to water and we didn't make it stink. I'm really big on that idea that there's two sides, that we can lead a horse to water but you can't make him drink. We can lead a horse to water, but we can really make that water stink. And no matter how nasty that water is, the message of Narcotics Anonymous is available from every sponsor in every and it's available in every meeting, depending on somebody's degree of desperation. But that's no excuse. to blow somebody off and say they didn't want it bad enough. It's, because not any philosophy, no moral stuff, no obligation here. It's just that experience shows us it's possible to recover by hitting bottom barely, by being attracted to what this program has to offer long enough that before you get sick of this fellowship, from a lot of people, their bottom is just a momentary window of opportunity where they're tired of their fellowship, their old using buddies, their whatever, and they're attracted to us for just a little bit of time. We're amazing at first until you get to know us, and then we're amazing again when you really get to know us. But there's this point in there, and with good sponsorship, with good guidance, with good luck, and good work, people have a chance to hit bottom in recovery. People have a chance to lose faith in their old way of life by, visiting that second step and having it grow bigger than that second step. By visiting that first step, by getting sick and tired of their old way of life, I still have to do that constantly. I have to compare the way my life is going now compared to how it could be going and how it starts to go every time self-will bumps in there. So I want to stay tired of doing it my way. I don't want to be spiritually exhausted. I want to feel the power of this program, but I don't want to get faith in my way of doing things again. The first sponsor had so many answers. It was amazing. By the way, can somebody give me a wave? And it's probably coming up in a couple minutes. And time is like almost up. I don't know what time I was.
You got plenty of time.
How much time do I have? I want to leave time for others. I'll give myself 10 more minutes, 5 more minutes, something like that.
Good, 11.
Cool. My first sense of different styles of sponsorship was, now it's looking back over time, people had their butts kicked, early on. Now a lot of people come through those doors, I think that just as many numbers of people are making it as before, but the proportion is really less because there's so many people who are just touching base, finding out about NA and moving on for a while. Sometimes it seems like, oh my God, we're just not reaching people. Well, we're just getting. Look at the numbers. We're reaching people. This program is growing so huge. And the tone has changed. We're not recovering outside of society. Society's changing. NA's changing. Change is inevitable. The question is, what's going to guide it today? My way or the NA way? On the other, what the NA way is, though, none of us has the corner market on it. Not only has the NA way changed over time, when I first got clean, all I heard was East Coast style, hardcore. The disease is right here, breathing down my neck, and it's going to run over me like a train at any second. A lot of fear, a lot of not having to move much beyond the first step because the fear was all it took to stay clean. Very, very barely scratching the surface on 2 through 12. Then I learned a bit about West Coast sponsorship. Wow, maybe it's not West Coast sponsorship. I don't know, but a lot of love. Love is all you need. I don't know. I heard a message recently, a guy with about 2 years clean, and it was so much a mix of a lot of that tough stuff with that, focus on the positive as well as the, as the negative. Wow, it was amazing. This guy gave me goosebumps. My sponsor today has less time than me. The last guy had a little less time than me. I've sponsored, guys with more time than me. I can't tell you what a breath of fresh air it is when I started being open and again getting over a lot of my dogma about what was possible. Not most of my dogma. I still carry a lot of it. I challenge my perspective on sponsorship as much as possible, but God, it's hard to get over some of this stuff. I was sitting in that meeting yesterday that I didn't plan on being in, and behind me was my current sponsor, and in front of me, the two people that happened to be chairing were the backups in my mind. Okay, if my sponsor fell off the face of this earth, and there was a local guy and another long-distance guy. The people that for the longest time, those have been in my head. I believe in fidelity to sponsorship, but not in the person, the relationship. When it comes to other relationships, with my girl, I'm not looking at other girls as far as, if my girlfriend drops off the face of the planet. But when it comes to sponsor, I keep other people in mind, not just for, that emergency, but because how I use them in my life today, how I listen to them, how I get them to put a different spin on things. But I don't use them as another sponsor. I don't even have that much contact with them. I'm just kind of aware of them. But one of them said they has 2 sponsors. I did my Scooby. And here's all this stuff that I got from World. They're like, I found that in November they were asked for input on sponsorship. They're going to either revise the pamphlet, add a chapter to the basic text. I don't know what they're going to do. We are going to do. They're looking for input on that. But as far as content goes, they said, hey, if you want what we got so far, just ask. And I asked. I only found out about it a couple months ago. And the deadline, I think, is in 10 days or so. But, I thought it was funny. Over here we got somebody quoting off of the page number from a different page number. I knew that page. It's page 55. And I've always been blown away by the line, sponsorship is also the responsibility of the groups. And I'm always asking people about that page number. So here's, on one end, a first edition. And on the other hand, we got stuff that ain't even approved yet. Where this fellowship is going. Some change is good, some change is just change. More will be revealed. But one of the things I just see over and over, some of the stuff is line-by-line revisions of the sponsorship pamphlet. And there's stuff in here that I'm like, no. And one of them I see over and over is that part about, I have more than one sponsor, we think not. And, people scratching out that we think not part because apparently we don't think not. I think not. But apparently we don't. I'm like, what? I'm like, dang. Time to work that open mind. It's hard. So I talked to my sponsor about it. And she said that. Sorry, had to get that in there. So anyway, there's a lot of neat stuff in here, including how to take your sponsor's inventory in a pie chart. That's really cool. Same sex as me and not a lesbian. Okay. 1 out of 2 is not bad. Another thing, though, real quick on some sponsorship tools. It's really easy to dive right into those steps now that I'm and into step work and looking at the philosophy and stuff like that. And both in sponsorship and in home groups, it's really easy when we get time to forget how desperate those late nights are when we're scared to pick up the phone and we don't even know that's what that damn phone number list that was shoved in our hand was for. I think it's real important to make sure that we give people the tools in their hands that they need, the stuff that they don't need to understand the philosophy of, to use. They can understand that, it's about the therapeutic value of one addict helping another later. First, let them know what it damn looks like. I didn't understand that stuff like therapeutic value of one addict helping another meant make phone calls when I'm craving. I had to be told actions. You know, so I really try and come up with staying in touch with that drug problem part for those people who are really new. What are my relapse warning signs? Write them down. What to do when they're happening. Write them down on the other side of a piece of paper. Carry it in your wallet. You know, carry the phone number list. That's another, in a meeting directory. Asking, telling people, ask people stuff. Ask for help of other addicts. That's one of the main things I feel like I do for my sponsees, and that I get from my sponsors is not just you, but they tie me in to other addicts and how to use them. I've had sponsors who told me everything what to do. I've also had sponsors who never once told me anything to do. I've found both approaches work. Had sponsors who never did anything hardly at all except for be my eyes and ears and where I was fucking up. And a lot of that, I don't even remember anything other than the pain. I don't remember a single goddamn lesson other than I'm not good enough. And I heard that enough. I'm already bent that way. And I don't remember anything other than I wasn't good enough for him. I would like it when somebody points out their eyes and ears about what I'm doing right. Shine a light on the good and it grows. Shine a light on the bad, it can grow too. My secrets live in the dark and die in the light, but my screw-ups, and keep pointing them out and I'll keep making them, make me insecure about them. I can that's up to me how I take things, but that ain't all on me. How we make it attractive or not makes a huge difference. I don't motivate my sponsees by anything other than attraction. I make it look good. I make this look good. Not superficially, because people can spot it when I'm faking it really easy. We can smell that in each other. I just try and be real, be an ass, be myself, not try and always act like, I remember one guy said, one of the things that his sponsees do for him is keep him in line. And like that whole, I heard somebody say last night, sing like no one's listening, dance like no one is watching. This guy taught me throughout my day, whether my sponsees are there or not, act like they're watching you. And I've really latched onto that, and I got some good lessons out of that. But I also learned how to just be myself, warts and all, and be a human, so people can admit things to me. They're not scared to talk to me and tell me when they're not feeling good enough, when they've got a craving. They're not accountable to me. It's none of my goddamn business if somebody uses a drug or not. And for me, whether they're lying, it's not personal. It's none of my business in Narcotics Anonymous, whether you're lying to me or whether I can spot it in you and I caught you in the game. That's all that ego stuff I fed into. I have seen people grow a hell of a lot faster without being accountable to me. They grew really well being accountable to me for a while, but I didn't. And they grow even better when they're not accountable to anybody but, the people outside of NA. The courts, their families, their boss. It's not about fix, manage, and control for me. And this isn't a philosophy. This is a working model. I first experienced the loose leash by accident. I was tired. I was too tired to make people jump through those hoops. And the leash got looser and looser, and they grew. Finally, I unhooked it. About the only hoop I have is get the sponsorship pamphlet and give me a call tomorrow if you can, because we should probably get going on this right away. Other than that, I share my experience. I also share other people's experience, but I don't make it up. In my own sponsorship, I don't just do the things my sponsor tells me. I ask you guys, what have you done? What have you done? What have you done? What have you done? And I say, hey, I know you don't have experience doing it this way, but with your spiritual experience in living this stuff, can you guide me through this take on it? And I'm real open to that from my sponsees. And I have them go out and find some more. I don't give a lot of the old time-tested direction. I have them go out and find it. If they don't find it, eventually I'll say, well, a lot of people try making a list of things they're powerless over. But the things I focus on are, get the phone number list, use it. Had a guy call me, the other night at 2 a.m. as a fire drill, because the night before he had a craving at 10, and he called one person, got an answering machine, hung up, and he called me the next day and said, I prayed through it and I white-knuckled through it, but I just couldn't call somebody at 10. I'm like, all right, well, tonight, you don't have to do this, but I'll be by the phone at 2 a.m, if you want to call. And he did. It was really wild, That practicing just these actions, these basic stuff, I feel like that's what I'm here for in so many ways. Finding the rest, I'll bump them, but first I'll send them out to the fellowship before spoon-feeding all the little things. Look at all the tips and tricks I know. I know a lot of stuff. I know a lot of people who are recovering without all that stuff, and recovering in a way that it looks really attractive to me. And I'm trying those different ways. I'm so glad I started looking to all kinds of people for my recovery. Oh boy. I want to just fire off real fast. Got a couple minutes left. That sponsorship workshop, we have an Ask It basket often down Lafayette. I love some of these questions. I've saved them. Take all those little scraps of paper and write them down. How do I handle it when I'm mad at my sponsor? Should I tell someone's sponsor when they have a sponsee who's messing up? Is it better for black addicts to have a black sponsor? Gay with gay? Pagan with pagan? What about sponsors for women who don't trust women? If it's the sponsee that's doing the hiring, can sponsees really fire? Or are they just, if it's the sponsee that's doing the hiring, can a sponsor really fire? Or are they just quitting? And I've quit in sponsorship. I'll respond to that question. I've quit in sponsorship. Sometimes conscious decision, but I didn't go the ego trip that I fired them. I can't fire somebody I didn't hire. But there are valid reasons for me to quit. Some of them are good reasons sometimes, but I make a conscious decision. Other times I make an unconscious decision, and the way that happens is I just stop responding like a sponsor. We get off a lot about people not using us like a sponsor, not calling, not ... And there's times when I don't call back, or there's times when somebody brings something to me, and instead of responding like a sponsor, man, that dick in the meeting, idiot. And I'm like, yeah, he gets on my fucking nerves too, and going right there. That's a friend. That's a buddy. And there's, it's not a formal relationship. It's an active relationship. And when I stop acting like one, I ain't your sponsor anymore. I stopped letting, first things first isn't happening anymore, and maybe it's time for you to move on. Or maybe it's time for us to get first things first back in, And I've also, as a sponsee, asked my sponsor again, will you be my sponsor? That's hard. That was hard. I think it'd be easier today, but back then, this was still a sponsor that was hard, and I kind of had him on a pedestal. But he stopped responding, so I asked him again, will you be my sponsor? It worked. He started responding again. How do I know when I need a different sponsor? How do I fire a sponsor? What should or shouldn't we do about disunity in an area related to an ex-sponsor and an ex-sponsee not getting along? Oh, yeah, I've seen that one. Should we do anything to protect newcomers from members who use sponsorship to find physical relationships? Sponsorship is the responsibility of the groups in the locality. That doesn't just mean hooking people up in my eyes. That means guiding each other through this. It's informal in its approach and it's implied, yada yada, but we work together. What can we do when we see our sponsors messing up but is too cocky to see it? When should I move on to another step? If my sponsor fires their sponsor, how long should I wait for them to get a new one before firing them too? That one was mine. I asked that one. It hurt. And I've been through it 3 times now, where it took too long before I had to move on. And it never came as an issue by itself. To me, when one of us gets stuck, we can tunnel vision in and pick on him and go, aha, my jealousy is vindicated, and pick and undermine, Or we can love and support each other through our fuck-ups and our being human. And I stuck around with trying to be that two-way street for a sponsor and take my responsibility as a sponsee to be supportive and to know that we're equal and any one of us can fall and we are strong enough to catch our sponsors. Not, sorry, dude, you were too big for me, But at the same time, I did have to move on when I just really wasn't getting what I needed. And the earlier I've moved on, the more I was able to follow up and remain a supportive friend. When I hung on too goddamn long, I had too much insecurity and too much resentment and too much just awkwardness to keep picking up that phone and calling that person, regardless of what our relationship is anymore. It's been a while since I called somebody that I'm feeling bad about that, because I know that they need me, Can I have a sponsor in another fellowship? How about a minister or a parent or a counselor? Can I sponsor someone before I'm finished with the step guide? What do I do if they pass me up? I got another question. Can I sponsor somebody at 2 months because I have the book? How do you find and use a long-distance sponsor? What is meant on page 55 of What Can I Do in the basic text where it says sponsorship for the newcomers is also the responsibility of the group? Good stuff. That sponsorship workshop has somehow pulled off when the area was really big and there were a lot of personalities on how things should look, and when that Lafayette area went small and the area committee was only meeting as 3 people once every other month. That area, that workshop has been where the only people from Lafayette that were there were the 6 people who put it on, and there were 60 people from around everywhere else. I am so grateful to my sponsors for the feeling and the love, just the feeling of being guided. Something I went through recently was I knew all this stuff. I knew what page I was on. I knew what the assignments were. I knew what activities I was supposed to be engaging in. But I wasn't feeling a conscious contact with my sponsor. And, there's been times when there's been times when I've gone a long time without calling my sponsor, but still felt the sense of direction I get with having a sponsor. It's really all about how I'm using them. With being without one, being too picky, waiting for the right one to come along, my relationship with everything has fallen apart. I have not felt like my life was going somewhere. Having a sponsor gives me a sense of direction, and using my sponsor, having an active relationship. I've been all over the place. I think I've spoke a heck of a lot longer than I meant to. I want to make sure that there's time for others, if there's any time left. I don't know. Love you guys. Thanks.
Thanks, Dave.
Okay, before we open the floor for sharing, I need to remind everyone that you are being taped. If you wish not to be taped, please let me know so that the tape can be turned off. I'm Johnny, I'm an addict. You know what? One of the greatest things about sponsorship to me is that it becomes a family. You know, my sponsorship family is large, and I have a lot of, I got a grandpa and a great grandpa, and then I got lots of nephews, and I got brothers, lots of brothers, and they're all over the state, and I can rely on them and count on them, and it's like this weekend when I came up here, a couple guys that I just started sponsoring, one of them's real physically ill, and he's found out by trying to go to functions that he can't do it. He can't do the campouts because he can't make it through more than a little over a day of it before he gets so physically ill that he has to go back home. And so 3 of the guys that I sponsor were going to get together and do some fishing and spend some time together this weekend, and I asked them if they'd open up and ask a couple of the other guys that they don't always include in those things to make them feel like they're part of the family too, you know, because that's how it works for me, and I think that's how it's going to work for them, and I'm really grateful for that I can go to Indy or Bloomington or, you know, Kokomo or anywhere, and I can find family members, and I can feel comfortable with them, and I can rely on them, and that really, really helps me to maintain my focus and to stay in the family and to stay in this fellowship, because I wouldn't have the family if it wasn't for this fellowship. And now it's open to anybody that wants to come up here and share.
Vernon Tate, come on.